Since opening in 2014, aeiva has been featured in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, The Nation, Raw Vision Magazine, PBS Canvas, and others. And we are very proud that all of our exhibitions and most of our related educational programming are free and open to the public. And so since quarantine, aeiva has been hosting a series of weekly live Zoom events featuring discussions and interviews with artists, curators, galleries, collectors, and art educators from all over the country, with guests now from many corners of the globe, as we were just talking about. And for the remainder of the year, we'll be doing live virtual programming in conjunction with our current exhibition, which is titled A la Carte, which features 37 nationally and internationally acclaimed artists whose work utilizes food to explore relevant contemporary social and cultural issues. These works examine the role of food in advertising, pop culture, nutrition, activism, food disparities, sexuality, spirituality, workers' rights, cultural identity, and so on and so on. And so and I'm mainly talking to our Birmingham and Alabama audience tonight. So, most of our programming is online for the semester, but we are sort of in the process of finalizing our plan for reopening. And so we are hoping to reopen to the public on a limited capacity sometime in the next month, next couple of weeks. And so we'll kind of keep everyone updated on that. We're very, very close. We're extremely proud of the exhibition, and we really want people to be able to see it, but we want to be as safe as possible. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it over now to Tina Ruggieri, who will introduce tonight's guest.
So I just want to echo John and thank everybody for being here tonight for our aeiva Inside the Arts program, where we're going to feature Emily Eveleth, who is one of the 37 artists in A la Carte. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tina Ruggieri. I'm the assistant curator at aeiva, and I really want to thank Emily for giving us some of her time tonight to walk us through her works. As a reminder, we love questions, so feel free to either type them in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen if it comes up while we're talking, or you can save it till the end, or you can raise your hand and unmute you, or I can read it from the chat if you want me to on your behalf. So Emily was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and she currently lives and works in the Boston area. She studied at the Massachusetts College of Art in Boston, and she has had exhibitions at galleries and museums such as the Suffolk University Gallery in Boston, Smith College Museum of Art in Northampton, Massachusetts, Danese Quarry in New York, and that's just to name a few. And her work has been featured in the New York Times, Art in America, and Bomb Magazine. She has an upcoming solo presentation at the Zillman Art Museum at the University of Maine, opening in May of 2021. Emily has mostly focused her artistic practice on a singular and signature image for nearly 2 decades, the donut. Her interest in this common food turns into a sensual and technically accomplished painting. She masterfully creates her thick and flaky donuts with photorealistic detail. Emily is going to walk us through the creation of 2 works that are featured in A la Carte, Big Pink and Degrees of Artifice. And now I will hand it over to Emily. Oh, you're muted, Emily.
Here I am. Now I'm not muted. So thank you very much. That was a wonderful introduction, Tina, and thank you, John, for describing the show a bit. I actually went to their virtual opening last week, and that was so great to see the amazing variety of thoughts behind the works in this show, and it's really fun to explore online, so I would recommend that to everyone here. And what I'm going to do tonight is a little bit different. I'm going to, for me, that is, do a brief overview of the donut series in general. So those of you who know my work and have gone to past talks will have seen some of this. And then focus on actually 3 works from 2015 to 2016, because 2 of them, Big Pink and degrees of Artifice are in the show in Alabama at aeiva. And from the installation shots I saw, look fabulous there. I'm very, very pleased with how they're hung and how they have resonance with the other paintings and artworks around them. So we're starting here with a studio view from 2006. And I chose this one as a starting point because it really shows you that one of the key factors that I was interested in playing up when I started working with this imagery was scale, to make the paintings huge. And that was to play up the underlying thought of the irony behind taking this object and making a formal, serious painting out of it. And that's almost the literary definition of irony, which is the contradiction between what is being said and the manner in which it's being said. And so the painting on the left, which is called Truce, is 177 inches long, which is just about a little less than 15 feet. Give you a feel for that. So and the next photo is of an installation at Danese, which shows you also the scale, but now the cropping, which became an important part of the thinking behind the works, because I wanted that not only cinematic close-up feel, but also that feeling that you can imagine these forms going well beyond what we're seeing, that it's even bigger than what it's being seen within the confines of the frame. And Amanda, the next, yeah, and even when these were small, this painting, actually I was trying to find the information on this painting. I believe it's on the scale of like 20 by 40, but even when they're small, they were sort of expanding from their, the boundaries of the edge of the frame. And you can tell in this era, I'm sort of into that Dionysian, falling over this drunken stupor of all these things moving. And then this one goes much more into just having two. So that we now, rather than thinking about being voyeurs in a situation, we very much can start to feel about what are we witnessing between these two forms. The other aspect I think about always, but we'll only mention in this one, is the idea of point of view. Where are we as the viewer, and how does that change our emotional response? Whereas this one is, it's just one. We're really talking about how do we interact with that one form. And here, I will mention Rothko a little bit further down, but what I had a lot of fun working with in this particular triptych was playing with exactly how much space was around this donut to get the sort of the maximum. I wanted the melancholy. I was actually reading Deborah Solomon's book on Joseph Cornell, and she talked a lot about the empty space that Cornell used to evoke sadness and loneliness and melancholy in his works. And this is an installation that was at the Smith College Museum of Art. And the painting we were just looking at, if you look at the right wall all the way down at the end, that's the painting on the end on the right wall. But the two I'll talk about in this image are, we can go back to that one. Thank you. Our twist, where there's no space whatsoever. It's really claustrophobic. And then on to Holding, which is on the right. And now, Amanda, you can go to the next one, because this is Holding, where I was quite interested in formal portraiture. So I'm looking at a lot of photography at this point. I'm looking at Yusuf Karsh and whatnot, but I'm really thinking about, what makes a portrait? Like when you're a landscape painter, what's the difference between just painting a tree and making a portrait of a tree? And what is the language of portraiture, especially studio portraiture? And the next image, this was one that I was looking at, especially the one on the right, the Paul Robeson, and how Karsh used that language of formal portraiture as far as black backgrounds and placement of the figure. And then I'm also looking at a lot of Ouija with the idea of the flash how does the flash change our understanding? How do different lighting situations make us feel different about the form in it? And this next one, I used a flash to make this image so that it seemed like these two donuts were sort of startled in where they are in space, and they're being caught unawares the way you are often, especially in the Ouija images of the Flash, where he's going to the crime scenes. And so that was really fun to explore. And this is a series hanging in my studio. I'm not now. I mean, this was hanging in my studio. And I've never hung them this way in a gallery, but I've always wanted to, where they're all the same size, they're all the same proportion. And the proportion is from a paperback novel, and the titles of this particular group, they all come from the hard crime novels of the 50s and 40s. And the center one, this one, Fade to Blonde, is one of the first times I actually used pink. And I wanted to pull this in as the history as when we start talking about big pink, because I had found that painting the pink frosting was really, it wasn't physically difficult, it was conceptually difficult. It was really easy to make it seem kind of cartoony, but I wanted more of a pathos to it. And so a few of those images, like the next one, I did, this was another one with the Flash, and they would become seeds and the catalyst for larger paintings, even though these were only 26 by 18. And this one was made into a larger painting that you see in the next image, which is an installation at Danese Corey. And the painting in the far back is the large version of the small painting you just saw. But the painting I want to talk about is the one on the left, which is called Mandate, and it's 101 inches tall. And what's so hard, as we all know from doing this on Zoom, is that it's really great to have installation shots, but also details, so that you can kind of feel how the paint looks when you're actually standing in front of it. But what I was thinking about in painting Mandate, the one on the left, was how, this is another one where you've got the claustrophobic cropping, but how almost a painting that large can become more intimate. And Rothko spoke about that. He had a great quotation where he said, to paint the small pictures is to place yourself outside of your experience. Whereas no matter how you paint the larger ones, you are in it. And so for him, obviously the idea of scale was really important, but putting you in it. But then, of course, me being the contrarian, I go on to have I get a new room added to my studio, and I get to, it had to be renovated because it was a mess when I got it. And the first thing I did when I had this big, beautiful new wall was, rather than paint a really huge painting, I started painting these really small paintings. And I was sure it was just me being a contrarian, which I'm often accused of being, and I often disagree with that, which actually just proves the point, I think, but nonetheless. And so these are 3 inches by 3 inches. But what I loved about paintings on this scale was how they activated the entire space. They too, like the big paintings, but in a very, very different way, activate the entire wall they're on. And I've always wanted them to be shown in a way where you see them with nothing around them. They have that much space. And then this one shows you what it looks like when you actually go all the way up to it and you approach it. This is 5 inches by 5 inches. Most of them were in the 3-4 inch. This is actually a big one of the small ones, if you will. So now we're in 2015 and 16. And this was the body of work that both Big Pink and Degrees of Artifice are in. And the alcove on the right, which is in the next image, shows you where Degrees of Artifice was. Behind us was Big Pink. But the one I'll start with is, in fact, the one that was in the middle of that long wall, and it's called that's called Arbitration. And the reason I'm starting here is because here in this body of work, how I was thinking about color was really changing, how to really exaggerate the color and what that does as to the emotional reading of the painting. And so I'm going to jump back. The next image, I'm going to jump back actually 4 years to a painting called Regency, because that was the first time I started really fooling around with the yellow and the glow and how to make something really have this eminence from within. And I was reading at the time a book by Marcia Hall on Renaissance painting, and it's called Color and Meaning. And so that was a very interesting thing to think about, because there's a kind of, one of the 4 Renaissance styles of painting is called cangiantismo, which is about how you keep colors very, very high key. And there, this shows you how in the yellow, where it went from high to dark, it went to sort of an orangey color, as opposed to going to something a little more muddy. But I was just kind of figuring it out in this painting. And here, this, I'm going to show you this because actually a few people who took my class, what happened is I've been rereading this book with my sister-in-law, who is the most exact reader of anything I've ever dealt with. I mean, she just tears these things apart, and it's been so much fun. But what's great about it is I was trying to explain cangiantismo, and I found that there's this Castagno image. And if you look at the second apostle from the left and the bottom of his robes, this explains it, because where that fabric is in highlight is light blue, but where it goes into shadow and darkness, it's red, which is a different color. So in other words, it's not that it goes from light blue to dark blue, and you can see that it's very much like what we now know as iridescent silk. And what it does is it keeps the shadows really high key. And the Renaissance artist who did the most with that is Michelangelo. And this is from the Sistine Chapel. This is the Libyan Sibyl. And so when I was thinking about arbitration, I was definitely looking at this Michelangelo. I was thinking about how did he bring those yellows into their dark area? How did he keep them so rich? And it has to do with adding pure color, as opposed to, and here you see it in arbitration, as opposed to adding its complement. Because most artists, and there are a lot of artists in the audience, know that when you're making a dark shadow, you often take the color you're working with and you add its complement, and that makes it darker. But here in this one, it was a lot of trial and error, how I actually figured out how to make the yellow dark without making it dull. And here, one interesting thing is this, I realized when I was looking at this image again, is that this was taken in process, and above the donut forms, it's sort of a reddish area. This is one of the few paintings I actually glazed. And so there's a glaze of green that will later go on top of that. But now I think we move on to degrees of artifice. Okay, so I was thinking about 5 things when I was planning this painting. I was thinking about powder blue velour as a fabric, Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp, Pontormo's Deposition, which is one of my favorite Renaissance paintings, and that's this one here. And if you look at Mary, and she's the figure on the right upper section, just above the woman in the pink and the reds, and look at all the blues that make up her robes, both from the lighter blue that's around her head to the darker, more intense blue that's in all the fabric around her. And yet they're all very, very high key. Nothing goes to a dark. And it gives it this luminosity that I was thinking about quite a bit. And I happen to find, and this is, I can't take credit for this because this is more recent. Big Degrees of Artifice was painted 2 years before any of this happened, but I just loved seeing this because the Met Gala, if you look on the left, the theme of that gala was in fact Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp, which was a big part of the painting I was doing. And look at the blue that this designer, Prabal Garung, used for that. But then I was even more smitten with what he designed the year before for fashion and the Catholic imagination. And that's the Virgin Mary was the inspiration. When you think of the Virgin Mary back in the Pontormo, you realize how close he got to that kind of blue, and that feeling of that blue was really what I was after. And so now we come back to the painting, and I just wanted to, what I found really interesting was that I didn't understand blue at all, and I still don't, as a matter of fact, until I was working with this painting, because a blue, I would try out a particular blue and it wouldn't work, and then I would try out another one, and what would work in the as a pure blue became different when you mixed white with it, and you couldn't guess whether it was going to go to a cool blue or a warm blue without just trying it out. And so that was really kind of fun, but extraordinarily frustrating too. But with it, and so this shows you that. So this is my palette, and I have actually two palettes going. You see the large palette in front, and you'll see in the bottom left, the blues I usually use, which are in that area, are alizarin crimson, are ultramarine blue and phthalo blue for the artists in the audience. But none of them are blues like what was in that painting. So, and the ones that were in that painting were like the ones that you see on the bottom right, which is Sèvres and cerulean. And then I have another palette, which you see in the photograph, that I use in my hand so that I can move around a little more easily. When I was titling the painting, I really thought back to Susan Sontag's sentence I remember underlining in the book when I read it, which was, "The essence of camp is its love for the unnatural, of artifice and exaggeration." And then there was another title that almost made it for this painting, which was from Castles of Indolence, which is a poem written in 1748 by James Thomson, and that talks about the castle height of indolence and its false luxury, and that witchingly instill a wanton sweetness. And I was wondering, with the blue and the yellows in Degrees of Artifice, whether I could get that kind of wanton sweetness. And this shows you how paintings start. These are thumbnails. They're probably 1 inch by 2 inches, something like that. And the one on the far right, you can see at the bottom of that little drawing, that's me trying to figure out how big the painting is going to be. Is it going to be 86 by 102, or is it going to be 80 by 94? I'm doing the math because the proportion is really, really important to me. And but these are how they start, with the thumbnail sketches. And the next one was the actual thumbnail sketch for Degrees of Artifice. I actually had this tacked on my wall while I'm painting, because what's really I love to do while I'm painting is come back to the thumbnail sketch, because that really tells me what drew me to the idea in the first place. It brings me back to my initial impetus. And now we switch to Big Pink, and this is the view you saw when you walked into that show. I showed you the installation shot for, and when you turned to the right, then you saw the rest of it. And this shows you what it was like in my studio. And here you get the feeling of these very small paintings. So painting on the right is 3 inches by 4 inches, and then Big Pink is 76 tall. And so I'm finally using that big new wall in my studio for larger paintings. And that's but the how pink, I'm going to go through a little bit of a history of me using pink, because I so resisted it for so long. Because I was like, I never played with dolls as a girl. I hated the whole idea of pink. And I never wear pink, even though some people told me I look good in it. I can't stand it. So when I started it, I wanted it to be kind of like an aged pink, kind of like it's slipping off, it's maybe been there too long, and what kind of emotional feeling can you get from pink that you may not expect? And then I happen to find, granted after the fact, but look at the figure on the bottom right in these Toulouse-Lautrecs. I mean, they're just so wonderful in their dull pink that just feels spent. I just love those drawings. And this goes on with the theme of sort of the fading beauty. I was actually looking at the work of Marilyn Minter when I did this, because she had some amazing, disturbing photographs of her mother, who was sort of the beauty queen, aging starlet who was denying her aging process, and just thinking about how you can have that feeling. And those are incredibly wonderful, disturbing photographs. You should look them up if you ever get a chance. And then we'll go back a little bit to lighting, because here, this is lighting that's very different from all the other lighting you've seen, whereas it's coming from below, and it's back to the idea of theater as opposed to cinema. The footlights that you might see, especially in early theater and vaudeville, and then of course burlesque. This was based loosely based on a photograph of a burlesque performer that I saw a photograph of her in the New Yorker. Her name was Dirty Martini, which I thought was so good, but the gallery didn't want me to name one of my paintings Dirty Martini anyway, which I thought was very funny. But we'll go to, here are some pinks where, you know, they're very different than you might expect pink to be. So, I mean, de Kooning had these great muscular pinks, really aggressive, whereas Guston has these very icky, sticky, like you can't, I love this painting. It repels me and attracts me at the same time. I have never used pink that's quite this ugly yet. I've got it, that's my next goal, you know. So I was thinking a lot about other people and how they used pink when I was doing big pink. But what I was really after in this particular painting, the contrast I was after was not so much an ugly pink. I actually wanted the pink to be really beautiful and seductive, because I wanted it to contrast with the form and the composition. I wanted it to be aggressive in composition, that it would really come out at you, and would you, you know, almost like have to step back from it because it would be too much in your face. And I remember, and here's a detail, one of the times it actually went to someone for a show where the people hanging it hadn't seen it yet, and they unwrapped it, and without even thinking, one of the people looking at it said, "We can't show that. We're going to have school children here." And I thought that was such a great response to it, because it is such an aggressive image. And this shows you another detail of the upper right, and how the sort of highlights are done. And the brush I'm using in this case is like a 3-inch wide house painter's brush at that point. And that's just one from my studio before I finish the upper right, but I take naps on my studio floor, so you all know that now. So what do we have next? And this often people ask me, how do I start a painting? So it starts with those little drawings that you saw, but then I draw on the canvas itself with a charcoal line, and then I go in with a colored line, and then sometimes I do an underpainting, and this just shows you that's a detail from part of the painting, and it's underdrawing lines, and then you see that same part of the painting on the left to show you sort of, that's how my brain works as I'm sort of putting the things together. And what do we have? And so I'm going to finish up with just a few. I've been thinking more about pink recently, and pink is like, you've got the pink pussy hats on the left, you've got the Disney on the bottom, you've got John Waters on the low, and I'm thinking, you know, pink is such, it's actually a color that had been Disney and little girls, but it's so broadened from that now. But then I happened to think back to the 70s. Maybe it was the 70s of, you know, seeing those velour tuxedos, but that Lily Pulitzer print in the middle has that pink and that green, and I'm thinking, okay, you got to be able to do something with that pink and that green. Yeah, that one right in the middle is just, that is so awful, and that could be so wonderful. And so I have like 2 more images. The next one, so I had used pink a lot as far as it coming out of the form. That is how, when you have the jelly, it sort of oozes and stains things. And this is a detail from Departures, which was in the studio shot. And I was fairly accustomed to that. But doing big pink and using pink sort of as something on top was very different. And as I'm continuing to think about where one could go with this, it strikes me that, could pink, which is a pastel, be also fluorescent? I mean, could it be, because when you think of hot pink, and that kind of contradiction. And I recently reread with a friend of mine, Against Interpretation, another Sontag, I'm on a Sontag theme here, where she talked about how the difference between the way a color is speaking, I'm going to leave you with this thought, the way a color is speaking in concert or possibly even opposed to what it is saying. So we think about color and what we think color says, but how does it say that and what way does it speak? And so that's what I was thinking about with these paintings, and I'm thrilled they're in this show. And if the powers that be allow visiting to Alabama by the end of it, I'll get myself down there. So thank you all for listening to me.
That was wonderful. Let's see. I do have one question in the chat. So Tim Schrager, he had to leave for a meeting, but he wanted to know, because he's going to watch the recording later, but he wanted to know about the titles of your paintings. Do the titles come first and then the painting somehow reflects the title, or do you name them after you've completed one?
Mainly, I name them afterwards. I always start with an idea. Like there was one painting that was called Floor Show here. It actually started off as Juicy Couture, but I decided that didn't fit. Because what often happens is I start with an idea and I'm painting along, and then the painting takes over and I'm more the recipient than the creator. And at the end, I title the paintings because by then they've often taken a different route that I might not have expected. Mm-hmm. And so the titles always come afterwards. And titling is a very tricky thing because I want two things with a title. I want the title to be suggestive, but not to be directive. I don't want you to think, oh, that's what this painting means. Mm-hmm. And this is what I should believe about this painting. I want it to suggest a couple of different things. And the more open it can be, while still maybe guiding you in a particular direction, is what I'm after.
That makes sense. And so it looks like Scott wants to make a comment. You can unmute yourself, Scott, if you want.
Hey, Emily, how are you?
Good, good.
So this is more of just a quick statement rather than a question. So when I first started collecting art years and years ago, I had these dear friends in New York named Marvin and Alice Cosman. And we would always compare notes and talk about artists that we discovered. And whenever I would talk about an artist that I found, Alice Cosman would always say, I would always say the work is great. And she would always ask me, is the work good or is it great? And so, they called me one time and said, we've discovered this artist and she paints donuts. And I said, Alice, is the work good or is it great? And Alice says, it's great. And I would have to say, I totally agree with her that I would highly recommend anyone that has an opportunity to see these works in person, you really need to do that because your paintings are so fleshy and so luscious. I just want to say how really great they are.
Thank you so much. I hope my husband's answering the phone that you can all hear in the background. Thank you so much. That is such a beautiful thing to hear, and it's really incredibly satisfying, especially the idea of seeing them in person. Because to me, what's so important about them is, in fact, that they're made of paint. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love photography. I look at a lot of photography to think about how an image is made. But I'm really a painter at heart. I just love the messiness and wonderfulness of painting. So thank you so much, Scott.
And that is like, that was something we were talking about. Maybe, I don't know if you were here, but we were talking about, John and I, when we first unpacked the paintings, just how different they were in, the thumbnails, first off, the size, so much bigger in person. So they really engulf you, but just how painterly and fleshy they are in person. So we do hope that people can get to come see them, because they're take on a whole different life. Paul Barrett sent me a question for you. So he said that you referenced portraiture as an inspiration for a lot of your compositions. Do you consider your paintings to be portraits? And if so, are they inspired by particular people or people in your life?
Oh, good question. I do. It depends on the painting. Sometimes I consider them to be portraits. Sometimes I consider them to more make reference to landscape or history paintings or crowd scenes or a casual snapshot. It really depends. So it has much more to do, rather than with an actual person, what kind of feeling I'm after. And I was telling my students this, and I made them do it too. I used to make lists of different kinds of feeling you might be able to get from a painting. Could you make a painting threatening? Well, and especially, I'm so into contradictions. It tells you a lot about me. But anyway, it's like, can I take a donut and make it threatening? Can I make it sexy? Can I make it something different than what you might expect? How can you make it be what it's not? And so a lot of them come from wanting to invoke in the viewer a particular feel. But what often happened, when I first started painting them for the first number of years, I painted them actually from life. So I would, in fact, have these little donuts up there in my studio, and I make them enormous. But I would often be inspired by some aspect of that particular form. Did it look slumpy? Did it look tired and at the end of the workday? Or did it look like randy and ready to go? And so could I play that up? Could I exaggerate that? How could I exaggerate that with the formal elements of making a painting?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Let's see, Robinson, a question. He said, why donuts and not something, say, like ... popsicles?
That's such a good question, because somebody said, well, why don't you paint bagels? I'm like, bagels, really? I mean, those are good for you. I mean, honestly, because and I didn't expect this to happen. When I first was painting, I was a landscape painter. I didn't expect to work in a series. That was a real surprise to me. But when I painted the first one, and I was doing this other still life with many, many other things in it, and I painted this one form, I thought, wow, this thing has everything, because it's physically beautiful. It makes reference to so many things, and yet when you think of its position in our society, it is unique as far as being about excess and indulgence and about so many societal issues that it draws in. And it's also one of the foodstuffs for which we have standalone stores. I mean, when you think about it, that's kind of crazy. Yeah. And so there's a way in which our society treats them so differently that I could play with that in the language of paint. So that's why it's donuts and not, something good for you. I mean, how boring is that?
Oh, that was a really good question. I enjoyed that. Let's see. Jack wants to know.
A really good answer.
Yeah, that was a really great answer. And I had never really thought about it. We do have standalone stores for just donuts. And so that's kind of interesting.
Because I always get the question, do I eat them, right? Because that's what people want to know, right? And so my husband had this great line. He said, there are two kinds of people in the world. There are those who eat donuts and those who lie about it.
That's great.
Jack, did that take care of your question, Jack?
Oh, you're muted, Jack.
Yes, I think so. I will just say quickly, I listened to the Brooklyn Rail talked with Wayne Tebow today, and he mentioned several of the very same things you've said. He also said, he talked about the messiness of painting and that's why he loves painting.
Yeah, oh yeah, Wayne Tebow is brilliant. And there's actually a book that came out where he wrote an essay on Morandi, and it is one of the smartest essays on Morandi I've ever read. So yeah, no, I have nothing but admiration for Wayne Tebow. And I meant to listen in on that talk today. I completely forgot about it. There's so many good things on Zoom.
I know.
Tina and I were both registered for it too, and I don't think either one of us got to
No,
go.
I didn't get
I
to
was
it.
there for about half of it, and then we had a meeting, so I only got to listen to the first half. But
He's in the a la carte exhibition.
he is.
There's a
Yeah,
waste.
so we'll have to watch it afterwards.
Yeah, I do think they recorded. So
Yeah.
if anybody has a question, feel free to.
I just have a comment. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say it meant a lot to me to hear you say that, to hear you tell that comment that you got about how you can't exhibit Big Pink because there are school children there.
Mm-hmm.
Ava has a reputation, especially at the university, for like not flinching when it comes to pushing the boundaries and like doing challenging exhibitions, especially for where we are, like in the deep South. And there was a conversation that Tina and I had at one point where I asked her, like, do you think we can get away with putting this painting on the cover of the book? It made me feel, it made me pause, which I mean that in the most highest of compliments, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Well, now I take it as the most highest of compliments, because that's exactly sort of what I wanted it to do when I was planning to how it might be made. Yeah. Are we allowed to ask?
Can I ask can you hear me, Emily?
Hear
Yes,
you?
I can.
Yeah.
It's Roberta.
Oh my God. I'm not going to take a question from you.
I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm just going to say that you are absolutely a wonderful speaker. I have heard you numerous times. This is an incredible, incredible conversation that you're having. And I just want you to know, and Keith, get in here, that we are lucky enough to sleep underneath painting of yours every single night. Okay, and we are lucky, and this is a wonderful, and you're doing, it's just wonderful to hear you.
Well, thank you so much, Roberta. And the thing I will compliment Roberta on is when we talked about exchanging artwork, which is what we did, I was over the moon excited because she, from the beginning, was intended to put my donut painting in the bedroom. And I thought, oh, that is good. And I don't know.
And I have to say that when we did this, I realized you were a better friend than me because you were going to make us a painting. And I said, Emily, I love you very much, but I am not making you a painting. You can take anything you want out of my studio. So thank you.
I love what I have.
So
But yeah, no, and that painting, it's a big painting too. It's not like some little demure painting over their bed. So it's pretty great. I need to get an installation shot of that so I can show it to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you did a beautiful, beautiful job. Wonderful, wonderful talk.
Oh, thank you so much.
Very wonderful.
Let's see. It's Richard Pleak said that he has a the Saint Catherine painting behind him.
Yes, he does. I saw that when I was looking. Oh, this is from, there was an early, okay, there it is. Oh my God, I love
Here it is.
that. So what's interesting about this painting was that early on when I was thinking about these being portraits and having Renaissance ties, I did some paintings where I put them in a landscape. And so what I did, though, I realized I really didn't need to make the landscape kind of more Renaissance in feel than contemporary in feel. And so this is based on a painting of St. Catherine from the Renaissance. And there was a whole series I did that had a lot of definite, explicit Renaissance ties. But yeah, that's an early one. That's one of my favorites. I know, I saw you when you first came in. I thought, oh, I need to take a screenshot of that.
And does anybody else have anything they want to say or ask any kind of questions before we have a couple of minutes before we wrap up tonight's talk?
Well, if nobody has more questions, Tina, I think we can sort of start to wrap up. I do really quickly before we leave. Let our normal sort of recurring weekly crew know that we're going to take the next couple of Tuesdays off as we get the galleries ready to be open to the public next month. But October 1st, if you have not been going to our Thursday night coloring nights, I highly recommend that you do that. We'll have Patty B. Driscoll there. And so we've been inviting artists to come, and we will take images of their artwork and convert them into coloring book pages that you can print at home. And then Christina McClellan, our education manager, she then spends an hour sort of like interviewing and doing a kind of like career spanning discussions with those while we color in those pages. And so that's our next big event, but I'll be back in touch soon. And then I'm going to let Tina close us out tonight. Thank you, Emily.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It just shows how much people love your work, who have collected your work and been following you for showing up. I hope that we have some more news for everybody about when you can come in. If you don't live in the Birmingham area, we will have a virtual walkthrough on our website in the coming weeks. John's working on that. So you will be able to virtually explore and see Emily's works in the gallery and amongst the other works in the show. So I just want to thank everybody again. And truly, Emily, it was wonderful hearing from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. This was quite a bit of fun. Thank you. It was a great event. I love all your events.
Thank you.